All right, Gary.
Okay, very good. All right, well, welcome everybody. Welcome those who could join us here in the room. I want you to take advantage of the river view and the crew races that are going on as we can watch on the river.
Hello.
Oh, hello. So use on the screen, I'm sorry, you can't see the crew races that we're seeing here live. And, but welcome to our Hudson 7 meeting for the month of May. My name is Gary Bassett. I'm the mayor of Village of Rhinebeck and the chair of the Hudson 7. And our Hudson 7 meetings are being live streamed on the Hudson 7 YouTube channel. We always welcome the public to subscribe to the channel. Our in-person meetings are here at the Poughkeepsie Water Treatment Plant at 70 Waterworks Road here in Poughkeepsie. And we allow public comment both in person and remotely. If you want to learn more about our Hudson 7 organization, for those visiting us, please visit www.hudson7.org. We've already kind of gone around except for, I forget your name.
Anna.
Anna.
Anna Buzakaris. I work for the DEC,
DEC.
Hudson River Estuary Program.
You were here before.
Yeah, I was here last month. Yeah.
We kind of introduced everybody that's on screen and here in the office already, so I'm going to bypass all of that.
Well, actually, sorry, Gary. We haven't done it on the record. We should do it on the record.
Okay. Okay. I introduced myself and
Ann Shershin, Town of Poughkeepsie.
Liz.
Liz Mosquito, Town of Hyde Park.
Anna Buzakaris, Hudson River Estuary Program.
Rebecca, you're in the top left.
Yep, Rebecca Martin, Source Water Protection Coordinator, Consultant.
And I want to welcome Kathy from the town of Lloyd tonight for her first meeting. We vote. So Kathy, welcome aboard.
Thank you. Kathy Rod Jacobson from the town of Lloyd.
Devin.
Hi everyone, Devin Rigolino, Dutchess County. I apologize for not being there in person, and I also apologize in advance. I'm going to have to hop off around 5:30.
I think you're happy about that. All right, Brian from DEC.
Yep, Brian Duffy, DEC Division of Water in Albany. I'm in the monitoring and assessment section.
Welcome. John.
Lipscomb.
Jonathan Churns, Dutchess County Water and Wastewater Authority.
Paul.
Paul Malmrose, Engineering Technical Advisor.
Jonathan, you're in your car now.
Yes, Jonathan Churns, Dutchess County Water and Wastewater Authority. I actually spoke over John.
That's all right, no worries. Richard.
Richard Distel, City of Poughkeepsie.
Thank you. Ryan.
Good afternoon, Ryan Sharp, Town Board, Town of Poughkeepsie.
And who's on 770?
That's Dan and Shannon from Riverkeeper.
Technical advisors. Hi.
Sorry, Dan. Dan Shapley and Shannon Roback, both technical advisors, Riverkeeper. And we don't want to forget John Lipscomb.
We did, John.
No, we didn't. Yep.
Anyway, John, retired from Riverkeeper Advisor. Thank you, everybody.
All right. So I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes from April 8th, 2026.
I'll second the motion.
And second, any discussion, changes or recommendation? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Treasurer's report. Pull that up. We have a bank statement, our bank statement from M&T. Our ending balance as of the end of the month was $17,035.37. We received one check for made one check for our protection coordinator for $6,250. And we have interest income of $18.88. It was loud. Rebecca.
Yes, I submitted my Source Water Protection Coordinator report for April of 2026. The new format reflects our new goals. Are there any questions?
The net change from last month to this month, Rebecca, just kind of maybe net one thing out, the highest thing for this month.
It did change from last month to this month, and I can just pull it up really quickly so folks can see.
Change, that's fine.
The goals and tasks that were adopted by the Hudson Seven recently are now the frame for the report. And so you'll see the goals are all reflected in the report, and each one of the tasks in blue is the work that I'm doing currently that month to move the Hudson Seven towards its goals. So there's a lot of great work going on every month. So
So we're going to move into communications. Rebecca,
yep, great. So this month there's just a few communications. The first thing is the Hudson Seven on request from Riverkeeper submitted an invoice for $1,900 to cover the grant tasks um for the New York State DEC's Hudson River Estuary Program grant, drinking water source protection monitoring for the Hudson Seven. Um, the EPA announced an effort to revitalize water workforce initiatives at Water Week Roundtable, which there's a link in the agenda if you're interested. The Center for Watershed Protection announced free pollution prevention P2 webcasts. Dan, I'm not sure if you want to say anything about that. I know you had submitted that thinking about the DWSP2. Otherwise, I can move forward. Okay. Dan is in traffic. Um, the Ulster County Water Quality Coordinating Council held their meeting in April, and there was a recap with all the materials, and I can send those around to anyone who's interested. And then the Hudson River Watershed Alliance Wavemaker Awards event was promoted by our partners at the Hudson River Watershed Alliance. That will occur on June the 3rd at 6 p.m. I also want to welcome Debbie Hecht, who just joined us from the town of Rhinebeck. Welcome, Debbie.
Debbie.
Thank you.
All right, and that's it for communications this month, Gary.
Thank you. No new events coming up. Anybody online for public comment?
No.
Okay, we're going to move on. Roscoe.
Sorry, just as soon as I get here with traffic.
That's what we hear. That.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, construction, right? Welcome, Roscoe.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to jump right into our presentation. Brian Duffy is here from New York State DEC, as does Ann, talk about the harmful algae blooms that we had last year and there's an update. Brian?
Yeah, sorry, I don't think that wasn't really what I had on.
No, it's not, Brian.
Yep, okay.
So let me introduce and say we've
Yeah.
invited Brian Duffy and the New York State DEC in order to give us an overview of a guide that the state just put out, a roadmap, a HABS roadmap, harmful algal bloom roadmap, to guide HAB research, management, planning, and outreach efforts for DEC, the public, and other key stakeholders. So we asked the DEC if they could come in and give us an overview, answer any of our questions. And so, Brian, thanks for making time for us.
Of course. Yep. Yeah, I'm happy to be here and present to you all and on the roadmap. We'll hopefully have some, something to share, for what we've pulled together in the future on the Hudson River itself. But for now, this is the roadmap, like you said. That was a great intro. Thank you very much. I'm the section chief for the monitoring and assessment section in DEC's Division Water. I touched on that earlier in the go around. So I'm just going to talk about the roadmap, but also provide a little bit of background. Some of you, if you've seen any of our HAB presentations, may have seen some of this, but I'm going to keep it brief on some of that background info, but touching on the holistic management that the approach we've taken for managing HABs over the past several years, and then sort of how that provides a foundation for what became the roadmap. And then touching on the HAB grant program, which hopefully you've heard something about. We announced that last week. To the HAB grant program is for advancing research collaboratively across the state. So HAB background, HAB reports have increased across the world in the U.S. in recent decades, and New York's no different. Between 2012 and 25, we've confirmed reports of freshwater HABs in over 700 water bodies. Every year, we see HABs appearing in new water bodies where we hadn't seen them previously. In 2019, the NIHABs, or New York Harmful Algal Bloom System, was established as a means of streamlining and making that reporting more efficient, the communication process to us, but also to our partners at Parks and Rec and Department of Health to communicate the HABs to them, but also publicly. We released an update to that in 2025, mostly just a visual overhaul, same functionality, but it's a little bit more smooth functioning now. And it's all very much visually based observation and reporting, right? Because it ends up being a very efficient way of communicating where and when HABs are occurring, as opposed to a more analytical approach to documenting and communicating about HABs. HABs obviously are a challenge, or we wouldn't be talking about them so much. Highly specialized, ancient, competitive, microscopic bacteria, widely distributed in lakes, lake sediments, and as we're seeing in rivers as well, more and more. Blooms are dynamic, spatially and temporally, but also with regards to toxin gene expression. Symptoms, health symptoms are possible with or without toxin presence. The lipopolysaccharides in the cell walls can cause itching and itchiness and rashes. Bloom formation is difficult to predict. Plumes are also extremely difficult to remove. There's really no silver bullet solution to mitigating HABs. And they're also challenging to characterize and quantify with regards to impacts to a water body and its uses, both in terms of spatial and temporal coverage and representativeness. And these photos on the right are images from, I think it's Canandaigua Lake this was 2017 when we used to do a lot of HAB response sampling. And the image on the left is the 16th of July. And then we were there a day later looking to take a sample of it, and it was gone. So that kind of just characterizes the approach that we've developed over many years to the visual observation and reporting. After a bit of applied research, we've developed what we like to call our holistic approach to managing HABs, starting with watershed management, conducting monitoring, developing phosphorus guidance values, clean water planning efforts, and other pollutant reduction strategies to really focus on phosphorus as the long-term controllable cause. Some of the other causes that we've identified in New York State, such as presence of dracinid mussels and orientation and fetch of our lakes and water bodies, are not something we can control. So phosphorus and nutrient reduction has become the foundation for that long-term effort to reduce HABs. Funding those strategies and clean water plans has been a big effort. We put a lot of money towards that, primarily coming through Water Quality Improvement Project program and the Non-Ag Non-Point Source Planning and Mapping Grant program. Researching HABs and their causes has been a big push for us as well, focusing on a lot of the things you'll hear about today: prevention, mitigation, monitoring, modeling, to understand causes. That's all laid out, and again, we'll talk about it more, but laid out in the HAB research guide that identifies our research priorities. And then lastly, we put this fourth out of the 4 steps, lastly, focusing on in-water body mitigation, because we want to make sure we're taking care of the long-term controllable causes before we're focusing on the in-water body mitigation, right? The blooms when they do occur. But understanding, those options and what works, and, helping to evaluate and how we best could control bloom size and formation. So that leaves us off at the roadmap. And the roadmap was announced in March. It provides a strategic guide for DEC, the public, and other researchers to further the statewide mission to address HABs and their impacts on water quality. I think one of the themes that you'll hear repeatedly in here is the collaborative effort that is our efforts to reduce HABs. And it's not something that DEC can do alone. So communication, coordination, collaboration is a big deal. The roadmap is made up of 6 focus areas covering important aspects of managing HABs. Each focus area includes a goal statement and then associated projects and tasks to help improve our understanding of HAB drivers, reduce the impacts to health and recreation, and all through, taking action, identifying short and long-term action items that can help advance our objectives within the roadmap and in each one of these focus areas. This next slide here just includes the QR code. It's easy to Google the HAB roadmap. Feel free to take a screen grab. I'll get into depth on the focus areas, going through the presentation, but real quick, running through monitoring and assessment, focus area 1, water quality standards and regulatory thresholds, planning and implementation, general and in-water body mitigation research, permitting of in-water body mitigation practices, and then lastly, public outreach and reporting. Monitoring and assessment, really focusing on deliberate and coordinated monitoring to support HAB data needs and to characterize HABs and water quality conditions over time. I think one of the things that we learned, at the beginning of our HAB response and development of that was that we need a very deliberate and coordinated approach to how we collect water quality data and analytical data on HABs, because we collected a lot of data in the early years, and a lot of it was not truly representative of the conditions within our water body, which is a lot of the reason why we focused and changed around to visual observation reporting, but monitoring of HABs with very specific research objectives and data needs in that effort. So monitoring in a deliberate way is really important, but also providing centralized access to the HAB data. We've got resources currently available, like our Division of Water monitoring data portal, exploring novel and analytical and monitoring strategies, publishing our applied research findings, also characterizing and understanding the potential recreational risk of benthic HABs. I think they're a lot less well understood in the literature with regards to in comparison to the pelagic counterparts that we often think about when we think about HABs. And then as needed, right, support the development of regulatory thresholds. So, and I think another element that's woven throughout the roadmap is the interconnectedness of the focus areas. So if we are considering regulatory thresholds, we want monitoring to support the development of those. Right, so that leads to standards and regulatory thresholds, identifying which key parameters could be monitored and relied on to identify waters potentially impacted by HABs. So looking at our current monitoring strategies at DEC and how we collect data, understanding and looking at our regulatory tool set, what kind of narrative criteria do we have that we could potentially apply, but also considering federal recommendations for regulatory thresholds, right? EPA has historically provided recommended criteria for states potentially to adopt if it works within their regulatory structure. But other questions we'll be asking is what can directly be monitored to evaluate water quality, and can it be modeled, right? Now we're sort of thinking towards the next focus area, clean water planning. Can those parameters be controlled by point or non-point source controls or other regulatory mechanisms? And how do we characterize representativeness, or one of the challenges that I laid out earlier? How do we understand what the impact to the water body and its use might be? From a clean water planning perspective, focus area 3, developing adaptive and efficient planning mechanisms for cyanobacteria aligned with the goals of DEC's clean water planning efforts. This is another important consideration. How does it fit into our framework? Consideration of HABs as part of DEC's vision prioritization process. And I think we've already moved towards updating that vision prioritization process, which allows flexibility in terms of what we prioritize for restoration and protection across the state. Exploration of the development of clean water plan framework, where nutrient reduction may not be a suitable or maybe not be the most appropriate planning tool. Because I think one of the things that we've acknowledged is that nutrients, while they are a big driver and the primary cause of HABs, it's not true for all water bodies. Some water bodies are low nutrients and still do have the occurrence of HABs. So I want to take that into consideration as we develop clean water planning considerations for addressing HABs. General and water body mitigation, conducting and supporting applied research that fills knowledge gaps on cyanobacteria in New York State. So using the research guide, which I touched on earlier, and scientific literature to identify and conduct collaborative applied research, right? We can't do this alone. Definitely need to use research guide, keep it updated, and make sure that it's available publicly. Support research through funding opportunities, in the same way that, Water Quality Improvement Project program supports implementation. We need to also support collaborative research through funding. So that's very helpful, in terms of broadening, our potential capacity for research. Um, Evaluate in-water body mitigation strategies. We touched on that, but continue to publish our conclusions on DEC pilot mitigation projects. Back in the last several years, we've conducted pilot mitigation projects. We've got a couple of those, or at least one of them out, a couple more in the pipeline to get those results out publicly available so folks can understand what potential options are, but also looking forward, providing guidance and metrics for documenting mitigation efficacy. There's a lot of mitigation technology and strategies out there that are being sold to communities. We want to help to document the efficacy, also with consideration of permitting needs. What are we going to ask for from a permitting perspective to implement these emerging technologies? So moving into permitting, so we're talking about in-water body mitigation practices, things that don't necessarily fit neatly into our, permitting toolbox. Developing consistent, efficient, effective, and adaptive approach for permitting future novel technologies, right? Figuring out how to, respond to HABs, which are rapid moving and ephemeral, and how do we develop a permitting process that can, be responsive to that. So evaluate in-water body permitting strategies of other states. And, that's an important consideration, but New York is unique in its permitting structure. But also streamlining, right? As I said, permitting of in-water body solutions by providing clear communication of permitting requirements and procedural steps, right? So applicants know what's to be expected, in an application, what kind of information are they going to need to provide. And then, as I touched on in the research, ensuring consistent documentation of treatment efficacy so we can start to identify if these strategies do work, because a lot of them, I think are proven in a benchtop laboratory setting, but don't necessarily translate to the ambient environment. But consider, the potential for formation of treatment byproducts, other toxicities, or effects on non-target organisms in, the implementation of these. Make sure we're documenting all of that for future, potential application. And lastly, reporting, right? Ensuring the transparency of the monitoring, assessment, research, planning, implementation, all the things that we're talking about here, mitigation of HABs to enable coordinated management. Again, it's all about, getting information out there and broadly available, for the public and other water managers to use. That includes things like publishing regular updates to our HAB web content to clearly convey, our data, the research, HAB occurrence, the things that we do, but getting it out there regularly and to inform our broad understanding of where known HABs are occurring. But also coordinating with stakeholders on management objectives, clean water planning, and in-water body mitigation efforts, making sure folks know, what we're doing, what works, what they might be able to do, because, coordination, education all helps with the implementation and, ultimately the reduction, mitigation of HABs over long term. So that, that's the research or the roadmap, briefly. And the last thing I wanted to leave off on was the HAB Research Grant Program announced last week. The grant program is intended to fund research in support of the objectives that we just described for research, primarily using the research guide as, to identify the priorities, and projects should specifically address at least one of the focus areas identified in the DEC research guide. So these are the focus areas of the research guide laid out here below. On the right is your QR code: prevention and mitigation, causes of HABs, monitoring and modeling, and then communication, education, and outreach. So just to wrap it up, this is the last slide here. DEC's, managing, communicating about HABs. We continue to do so. Applied research is critical to inform a strategic adaptive approach. Statewide collaboration, I've touched on that several times now, is also important. Taking that holistic long and short-term focus, right? Just addressing the controllable drivers, but also considering what the short-term solutions are, and then continuing, right, to continue to consistently and clearly communicate on HABs and report about where and when they're occurring across the state. So that's my slide deck for you all. I suppose I have time for some questions.
Thanks, Brian. Gary?
Yeah. So, Brian, this is Gary. I have a question. Actually, two questions. The first is, what type of organizations do the permitting on the technologies?
Uh, um, what types of organizations do permitting? We DEC and our environmental permits issues the permits. Um, but I think what we're considering is, we have lake associations and other organizations publicly that are looking for solutions to try to address HABs, right, and control some of those, the bloom formation. So we are seeing a lot of technologies emerging, companies that have, I think, hope to have found a solution for controlling and reducing HABs are approaching our lake associations and other, collaborative partners out there with these potential solutions. And then we're seeing, applications or hopeful applications of some of them in some of the water bodies across the state. So that's what we're talking about for permitting. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, kind of, because it leads into my second part of that, which is you talked about prevention. And if these technologies are used to either mitigate or prevent, have you seen any successes?
It's we haven't seen a ton of success. I think there's been a few treatments attempted in some of the lower Hudson Valley lakes, or at least one that I can think of that wasn't overly successful or successful at all. We've seen, I don't know if you've heard of ultrasonic mitigation using sound waves to, disrupt cyanobacteria buoyancy. That's not been effective in the ambient environment. What we have seen, in some of, I think the literature that I like to point at is, and we do have, this is one, I believe it's the one mitigation summary that we have completed from some of our mitigation pilot project efforts in the past, was what we call electrochemical oxidation. So essentially that treatment was meant to basically uses the chloride ions in a water body, passes electricity through them, and essentially chlorinates and treats the cyanobacteria and anything really that's in the water body as it goes through the treatment process. That's a good example of mitigation research or mitigation technique that we know essentially how well it works. I think one of the challenges that we see with things like that is that the scalability is a big challenge. Is how do you get from something that's sort of mounted on a boat and uses a certain amount of energy to something that could be scalable to a whole water body. So we haven't yet seen things that work. I think, at least I don't know of, on a water body scale. Some of these new novel technologies, I've not seen the scalability. I guess that seems to be the challenge, where they work maybe in the benchtop or on a small scale, but how do you treat a water body?
I guess my last part is we were very fortunate last summer that with the algae bloom here in the Hudson River, our water plants were able to basically screen that out. I don't know if screening is the right word, Dottie, right? But it became non-harmful in our output of our water, because as it went through the process, it eradicated the bacteria that is in there. I'm just wondering if that's a technology that we have to worry about going forward, or what other things we need to do in our water plants to protect the water.
Yeah, I think one of the and I can't, speak from a place of authority on this, but I think some of these technologies that we're seeing that maybe function or don't function in the ambient environment, I think we consider how, because they work in a controlled setting, how could those kind of things be used? And I think that's where these research questions could be asked in a different environment, perhaps, right, from a water treatment perspective, where you have a more controlled system. And I think certainly, DOH does a really good job on the treatment process currently. And I think I'm super confident, and we work closely with them on their ability to, provide clean water, drinking water across the state. But I think those are where we see some of these emerging technologies. They don't necessarily work in the controlled ambient environment. Maybe there's potential in a different place, in when it comes to protection. I think those are the questions that we can ask as well. Are there better applications for some of these technologies?
We care about taking it from the river and putting it out into drinking water.
Right. Right. And I think the challenge that we've seen is that these mitigation options might not work in the river, but maybe they work in another, right, a more controlled environment in that process. I can't speak for DOH, but all I'm saying is that maybe some of these technologies that have shown promise in a controlled setting can be used in another controlled setting. So it's just a potential different use of some of the technology that we've seen.
Okay, thank you.
Paul had a question, it looks like, and I just want to welcome Paul Melrose. Kathy is our technical advisor on engineering, and Andy Bicking from the Department of the Environment in Ulster County. Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Paul.
Ryan, thank you for the presentation. It was really good. I'm glad you're concentrating on it. I know you've been working with a lot of the lake associations, but what we're seeing now is that our streams and rivers are seeing um, had, and I'm wondering, has DEC taken any regulations on maintaining that minimum flows are maintained in our streams, especially downstream of dams? And has there been any work done with the Hudson River, North Black River regulating district that controls the water going into the Hudson River? If we didn't have them this summer, we would have really had a disaster on our hands because they released a lot of water. But we don't really have any means of coordinating with them at this point in time.
Yeah, I can't speak to that program, the water release program. So I don't want to, speak too far out of line. I think that's a good point, and it brings up a good, question, I think, about how do we address some of these issues, when you get to that point. Hopefully we don't see drought like we saw last summer, but that, potentially is one of those types of solutions. And I guess those are the kind of questions that we need to be asking as we, move into climate change. But it's a really good point.
The other thing is that, our plants produce a lot of alum residuals. DEC has classified it as a waste that has to be disposed of correctly. But other states are using these residuals to absorb phosphorus around chicken farms and farms like that, and I've seen drastic improvements in lakes and things like that. I think it would be good to take a look at that because we have so much of it and we're treating it as a waste product instead of something that could help us.
Yeah. Well, yeah, alum and nutrient activants have been a big, not question mark, but something that we've been working on now for quite a few years. And hopefully you're aware of some of the pilot efforts on Peach Mohegan, Honeoye Lake more recently in 2022 that we're working on the results for that, were intended as pilots to inform, how we might use alum into the future. So I think it's well acknowledged that alum and nutrient activants are used in a lot of states, if not, not most. But I think we need to understand how New York can use something like that, we have our own unique permitting structure when it comes to, pesticidal intent and um, the types of products that, constitute pesticides. So we need to make sure that we develop a pathway or consider, all the options when it comes to things like nutrient activants. So it's point well taken, and I think it's something that we've been considering now for quite a while, and we should be finishing up the results of some of those pilots now in the near future and getting those results out and hopefully charting a path, or understanding how we might chart a path. I think that's, again, going back to it, is that's the goal of those projects, is understanding how we could potentially use nutrient activants safely and effectively, consistently across the state. So it's a good
Thanks,
point.
Brian.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Any other questions? No. Somebody ready? So again, thank you very much, Brian. Very informative.
You're
Yeah.
welcome.
Thanks to the team too. We're glad you could make this happen. Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna move on. All business. We're into the bylaws that we introduced previously. I'd like to make a motion to approve the amended bylaws as presented.
I'll second.
Thank you, Andy. Any discussions, questions, or concerns? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So passed. Thank you so much. I also like to introduce going forward a records management policy. This is in draft form right now. We're distributing all of your information to make sure we're handling correspondence and retaining the correspondence for an active period of time as it relates to ongoing matters. We're putting this into your record now to review, and then we will vote on at our next monthly meeting. Any questions? Okay, very good. Thank you. John, you're up. Captain Liscombe, let's talk about, actually, what not you're really up. I want to change your title. John just Liscombe is one of our technical advisors. His title was previously spill risk and vessel safe, was air contingency plan on spill risk and vessel safety, as our technical advisor, but you also attended the April 16th meeting. I'll get to your title change, later, sorry.
Okay. That's okay. You can do it. You might as well.
Yeah.
Just to say that there's a motion on the table to replace John Lipscomb's technical advisor expertise from anchorages to vessel traffic and spill prevention to represent the work that he's doing now.
No, yeah, okay, go ahead.
No, that's right.
Yep, that's correct. Thank you.
Mhm.
Excited to make that change for you.
Yeah.
A motion's on the table, Gary.
Right, so do I have a second?
No.
And thank you. Discussions, concerns, or recommendations? I think this is the right way because we really are focused on prevention to have John focus on being prevention. All in favor of changing John's technical advisory title to prevention? Say aye.
Aye.
Very good. All right, John, I'm going to circle back to April 16th meeting.
Yeah, I see on the agenda, that I've got several things to report out to you guys. April 16th was a meeting with the Area Committee of the U.S. Coast Guard, Port of New York, and it's, they have these about every quarter. Not a lot happens, but it's very important to maintain personal connections. The sad news is that some of our key players, like Greg Hirsch, who was at our at Hudson 7 meeting, and the captain of the port and Drake Chick are moving on with the standard Coast Guard rotations. So I did meet the new captain of the port. I don't remember her name off the top of my head, but she's not a new face. She's been in the area for a while, so I'm very hopeful that our good relationship with the Coast Guard will continue. The other part to report out there is that the Coast Guard isn't going to get much done in terms of outside requests until after the 4th of July. They have a nightmare scenario in the Port of New York with visiting naval vessels, visiting foreign naval vessels, visiting tall ships, the largest fireworks in the history of the nation, FIFA World Cup, and the president coming to town and the security issues involved with that. So they're all going to be bald by the mid-July. It's a rough time, but they are committed very much to these, tuning up the area contingency plan, which is the spill guidebook, essentially, manual for the Hudson Valley and the Port of New York. And they have these subcommittees. And as you may remember, I volunteered for two of them. One was a training and exercise committee, and the second one is a response and recovery. And it turns out they're going to have these subcommittee meetings on the backside of the area committee meetings, and you can't attend two. So I've asked to join the response and recovery subcommittee, which is more appropriate for the concerns of the Hudson Seven. But I doubt anything will happen on that front until after July. That's basically the Coast Guard update. Second item on the agenda that I'm reporting out is that the EPA, so the EPA has this is Region 2, so they have a regional response team, RRT2. The meetings are twice a year, I think. And this is a 2-day meeting on June 3rd and 4th. I've signed up for it. Again, it's mostly policy. It's mostly 30,000 feet. But these are relationships that we're absolutely going to want to have when it comes time to potentially discuss changes in vessel traffic on the Hudson to protect against a spill. As we've said many times, recovery is almost impossible, and prevention is the key. So, for example, one idea that could be employed is to decide that, okay, certain cargoes are not going to travel during the high risk seasons, like when the river is ice covered and recovery is even more impossible than impossible. It might be that certain cargoes would require an escort tug when passing through critical areas of the Hudson on their way to Albany. That's done. There's precedent for that in other places. So I'll attend on the 3rd and 4th, and I'll report back on that. Moving down the list, one thing, Nick isn't in tonight, but one of the things I saw Shannon at a meeting recently, and she mentioned that vessels are anchoring off of Esopus again, commercial vessels, which, as you remember, led to the whole Anchorage kerfuffle. And so I asked, I would like to speak with Nick, and Rebecca's going to make it happen, so that he and his team all have a plan of action when they see a vessel and how to report it out in real time so that we can report into the Coast Guard, because as everyone here knows, that is no longer legal except in an emergency. And so that follow up on that.
John, just to be clear for everyone, Shannon Harris,
Yes.
who he's referring to, is the deputy supervisor,
Yeah.
town of Esopus. You saw her recently.
Yeah, and she lives right there. So I said I haven't seen any more reports. She said, well, I stopped reporting. So I think it's a better duty to hand to people at the water plant who are going to be there more often, and where there's multiple staff that will all have the same procedure if they see a vessel anchor. Then the next item is CSX, and I vote that we call it, instead of bridge repairs, we call it rail safety for as an agenda heading. As you guys remember, we had a letter out to Maurice O'Connell a year ago. Then we repeated that this year. We ended up having a productive phone conversation with him. And he reached out to me yesterday, and was, no change in tone, very nice. He would like to schedule a follow-up meeting in the next 2 or 3 weeks, and will send us some dates. This time, per our request, with one of the spill tech people at CSX, a guy named Dave Scooms, who has a lot of experience. And what we're as we start this conversation with CSX, what we're really interested in knowing is what is their drill schedule? How many have they done? What have been the outcomes of those drills? What are the specifics of those drills? Where was the simulated spill? Where did it occur? We want to, again, the whole thing here is, before we can ask for additional protections, we have to kind of reinforce that spill recovery from a spill is virtually impossible. So with the Coast Guard, with CSX, with DC, we're talking about starting at the bottom, getting our facts right. What is actually achievable when there's a spill? And with the Coast Guard, we'll be asking for a more meaningful drill in the future. Right now, there really aren't. They're great. What they've done is great, but it's not enough to show that we can respond in time.
John, this is Kathy, to add to that, you know, as it relates to protecting the water supply, uh, first responders, including all the fire departments on both, are usually called in for those spill, including the hazmat teams.
Right.
I would just want to make sure when you have that conversation that CSX is working closely with first responders, whether it be through the Ulster County and Dutchess County counterparts in the public services and public safety services, because a lot of times there's disconnect there.
Yeah. And I see Andy has a hand up.
Yeah, thanks, John. I think you mentioned something about conversations to restrict traffic at times of years when it would be really challenging to recover material. And I'm wondering, are you aware of any precedents? Like, has that happened anywhere else in the country in a federally navigable waterway?
I don't know. I'll answer it two ways. I I don't know the answer on vessel traffic. And one of the questions for the Coast Guard and these subcommittees would be to ask them to tell us about any of those kind of restrictions. I've got a couple of things to answer your question. That would be something we ask of them. We don't want to have to do the homework. It would go to drills also, Andy. We want to say to them, give us some history of drills the Coast Guard has done in ice conditions, in moving water conditions. And so that we can learn from what's happened beyond the drills that have happened in the Hudson Valley. Partly to answer your question also, in terms of one of the strategies with high risk cargoes has been, and there is precedent for escort tugs. And the one that comes to mind the most for me is in Buzzards Bay, south of the Cape Cod Canal. And they had a giant spill from a big tug oil barge years ago. And in response to the spill and the fact that the shellfish beds were closed for years and the cleanup was enormously expensive, the state of Massachusetts instituted an escort tug.
So remediation measures, yeah. Mhm.
But the problem with all these things is they do it after the spill.
Mhm.
We would really like, and nobody's drinking Buzzards Bay water except the fish. But what we would really like is to just not have the spill. So there's a lot of great conversation that can come in the future. The other thing I'll say, Andy, is that we as a society see all the time restrictions on cargoes at critical infrastructure. So if you drive through the Baltimore Bridge or you drive across the Tappan Zee Bridge, right now there's a sign in Rockland that says vehicles with class XYZ explosives must exit here. So we've decided as a society that we can't risk that bridge with those cargoes and they must exit here. Now, tunnels, the same thing. So if we can protect our tunnels and bridges, we should be able to ask that we provide equal protection for a river, and that's a drinking water source. I think it's new ground, and we'll see how it's received. But it's a new approach, a newer approach to an old problem. That cover it?
Yes.
That's awesome. Thanks.
So we talked about Nick, we talked about CSX. Oh, the last thing on Maurice O'Connell is that he welcomed my offer to connect him with the Coast Guard so that they will come to the area committee meetings and hopefully they will send a tech. And these area committee meetings are mostly Coast Guard staff and industry people. So it would be a big addition to have the rail carrier there because as the question before you was coordination with local emergency responders. To my knowledge, there's very little coordination between the Coast Guard and CSX, and those are the two responsible the two agencies, the two entities most responsible in terms of the volumes of potential pollutants that they carry. So it's all good progress. Last item on my punch list here is to revisit the issue of the coal tar coming up from the Central Hudson site under the walkway bridge. And so I sent some photos to Rebecca, which she's going to put up. A refresher is that.
1 second, can you see that?
Yes, thank you. Yep. We did, as everyone knows, talk to the DEC and Central Hudson about the coal tar that was bubbling up last year when the water was warm under the bridge. Rebecca did a beautiful job of monitoring that on a daily basis and built a huge database of images. Central Hudson subsequently, as others remember, there was another round of coring to identify in a more detailed manner where the coal tar is located in the bottom sediments. And so as you again may remember, I'm trying to do a little refresher. We asked for the DC and Central Hudson to come up with a plan in the event that the coal tar starts bubbling up again this year. And there are two parts, of course. There's the ultimate cure, which we are told by the DEC that Central Hudson has given them a new draft, final cure, new draft, but we haven't seen it yet, so we can't talk about it. But the other half is what happens between now and the final cure, the final remediation, and if this coal tar bubbles up. And I had mentioned that I was going to try to connect with Frank Zulak, who is just retiring in a couple weeks. He's the NOAA, basically technical advisor to the Coast Guard on spills in the entire Northeast and much of the eastern half of the United States. And he was at the area committee meeting, and I cornered him with a map, which will come up in this slide deck. And perhaps, in fact, Rebecca, we could go to the map and then come back up. Could we? We haven't, no map yet. I'm just letting you know so you know what we're seeing. Okay. And then make it as big as you can. And you'll see my primitive Fred Flintstone computer graphics here. So the dark black lines and the pieces of Post-it are mine. The map came to us last fall after that second round of detailed investigation. And the legend is very tiny, but basically, you'll see in this, I've highlighted in red the easternmost bridge pier of the walkway bridge. And the coal tar was bubbling up between that and the Poughkeepsie shoreline, mostly just north of the bridge. So there's kind of an X marks the spot there. And so you don't really have to lose your vision looking at the legend. That's where it was happening. So when I presented Frank Zulak with the early ideas that DEC came up with Central Hudson, which was to put bubblers under the water, and the bubblers would essentially come up with the coal tar. And the idea is that it would break up the coal tar so that it didn't produce a sheen on the surface. We're going to go back and revisit a couple photos of those sheens. I just speaking for myself, not for the council, but I don't like that idea because that's the same old of dilution is the solution to pollution. We're not going to remove the pollution from the water. We're going to just make it not visible to people on the shoreline.
Yeah, that's
We're
all
going
they
to we're going to stir it into the water so don't worry about it. And I don't like that. I don't like that at all. So I talked to Frank and I said, are there any examples you can think of collection systems for this kind of problem? I brought him the map. I showed him the chart. And one pot, he said, worth a try to put a long boom north and south of the bridge. It would not intersect, it would not block the launch ramp, and it would not block to the north the rowing docks. And it would be, now we can go back to those photos, Rebecca, if you don't mind. Sorry, there's a lot of material this month. So it would be a two-component system. The inside would be this absorbent boom, which was in the first photo, which is non-structural. It just absorbs oil. The oil clings to it. It's a Swiffer. And so then to protect it from floating debris like driftwood, you'd have to have a structural boom, which is in this picture, the yellow boom. We'll go to the next image. And I've got this is an example of a much heavier boom. Frank Zulak said for the river conditions, we'd need what's called, quote, ocean boom, meaning robust boom. The reason for those long angles in that map is that you don't want the boom to be 90 degrees to the flow of the current. You want it to have a chance to survive that strain. It would be secured at the pier of the bridge, but not right up to the pier, so that driftwood would flow past it and down the river or up the river, depending on the conditions. And we can go to the next image. This is an example showing that boom is deployed in, it's capable of massive long deployments. When that tug specialist hit the Tappan Zee Bridge during the construction and sank with loss of life, Miller Environmental brought 1,000 feet of boom up to protect Piermont Marsh, which was a great effort. Problem is they came up 2 days after the accident, so it was meaningless, but it showed that 1,000 feet of boom can be done. And it was a single vessel did the deployment. We can go to the next image. This is a list of all the various times that
Well, John, this is a snapshot of the document that Hudson 7 has that shows but you've already updated you refreshed everyone's memory to get into what we saw.
Yeah, and then Rebecca loaded a couple images of what we saw. So I wanted to remind everybody that this is what we're talking about. This is the phase one, dealing with this. Phase two is the final remediation. But we had day after day after day where from the shoreline as far out as you could see, this stuff was on the water. And I don't believe that bubbling is an appropriate solution for a river as important and valuable as the Hudson. So I think the next step with this, if you all agree, would be to request a conversation with the DEC, perhaps Central Hudson, but at least the DEC, to talk about what about Frank Zulak's idea? Let's go to the next slide, and then
Yeah.
I put this picture just because it's horrible, and it puts into it. We need to be reminded that all this spill prevention conversation is not it's not just academic, and so a big spill on the Hudson, one of these big barges or a big train, is a real event. And then we can go to the last. I think that's it, right, Rebecca? Yeah. Then there's the map. So yeah, lots of material. I'm sorry for taking so much time. But that's all progress, I believe.
John, that's great. We do have a meeting coming up that we're trying to get scheduled with the DEC in Central Hudson. I think, right? I have to go back and look at my calendar, but wasn't Heather going to schedule that?
I'm not aware of it, but I could easily have missed it.
No, I think the last time we heard from Heather was February the 27th.
Yeah, and I thought we
the
were,
22nd, and she was going to be creating a submission for you to review on what she'd been discussing with Central Hudson, which we have not received. And so maybe that's an action item, is to follow up with Heather.
Was it Heather or Kelly? Kelly.
I'm sorry, Kelly. Heather is not. That's
Heather's not in this. Yeah,
Kelly Turo, not right.
yeah.
So maybe that's the next step, Gary, is to
I
follow
agree.
up.
Gary, do we need a motion at this time to advance from there to meeting with the DEC?
Well, we already have had recurring meetings, so it's just a matter of reaching out and saying we'd like to Kelly to get another one scheduled. So I don't think we need a motion because they're already in that communication.
I didn't know.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked because
I'm
it's
wondering too if yeah, just to put a to so who would be at that meeting?
well, John and I were at the last one with Kelly.
Great.
Is the coal tar that's bubbling up, is it from like a Superfund site or?
Yeah, the
GP site.
the gas plant right off
It's
of
a
here.
Superfund site, so then you should have,
GP.
yeah, like the Division of Environmental Remediation there, like DER is what they call themselves.
The more the better, as far as
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is one of the last hazardous dump sites on the river.
Yeah.
And it's a 7 acre coal tar site right here, just off the bridge from the manufactured gas plant
Mhm.
in the 1960s when Central Hudson was just dumping it. And Central Hudson's on the hook to fix it.
Mhm.
The problem is how to fix it. Everything they've tried, we've been monitoring and has failed, and we are getting coal tar into the Gibson water treatment plant here
Right.
as a result of their experimentation. So we said they need to go back, and they've been promising, as John mentioned, another sample. John does cliff notes here, the bubbler, which
Yeah.
none of us like,
No.
right?
With that long,
But that's
what do you call
John.
it?
This is the first we've seen that being
That hasn't really been discussed.
has not been discussed because their attitude was the river's too rough, it's too volatile, there's too much traffic. Anything we put in the river won't hold up. That was their answer.
How long would you keep something in there like that?
It's likely that you would put it only in the warmer months. First of all, it would not stand up to ice at all. But the experience we've had with the coal tar bubbling up from the sediments is that the sediments and the water need to be warmed to mobilize it. And last year, I think it was in November, when the river started to cool off, it shut itself off. So the answer to your question is, without any further information, it would be the warmest months of the year.
And my question is, where we've made GE through the courts do remediation on PCBs, why aren't we in that mode?
Well, for years, how many years now? We've been working with Central Hudson for a long time, but that even started before us. This is an identified hazard site that they are responsible for. That's given. DEC is supposedly driving that ship, pardon the pun, but we didn't think DEC was driving the ship enough. So that's why we intervened as Hudson 7 to force action.
Yeah, I think they did a remedial investigation and then they did a design report and now they're doing additional pre-design investigations. So they're moving along in the process.
So they are moving along.
Yeah. So Hudson 7's been involved since 2018, and what I just shared with you all is actually the trajectory and the DEC's original concept to manage this problem was intervened by the Hudson 7, as Gary just described. And so I'm going to send around our campaign report just to refresh everyone's memory of the long history the Hudson 7 has in making improvements to this problem, because it's good history, and for
Yeah,
everyone to be aware of.
in the latest communication from one of the DEC, I can't remember, I don't have it all in front of me, but we were told that Central Hudson had submitted to DEC a new plan for phase 2, the full remediation, the big job, and that DEC would review that with the Hudson 7 when they had had time to review it. So in our outreach to Kelly on this issue, it should be two parts. One is we'd like to talk about a potential plan to deal with coal tar, problem one, and we'd like to hear what Central Hudson has proposed in their newest draft of the part two, the full remediation. And we'd like to have that as soon as possible because we'd like to have a plan in place when the water warms up if the coal tar comes back up.
Now, Donnie's already seen it in her plans. So,
And how, since I'm new to all this, how did it go and you handling it in your water plan at that point?
So we had to, we shut down immediately and we used absorbent pads in our process. Luckily, in order to shut down, nothing went into the plan effluent, but we didn't see any of the sludge that we.
but see, here's the problem. They had to shut down.
It's.
We don't want to have to shut down the plant, right? That's producing 10 million gallons of water because of this. Because once it's in the plant, you shut down until you remove it. What John is proposing is how can we stop it from escaping from the site so it doesn't approach the intake here?
Right.
Which is interesting because your intake is what,
40 feet down.
40 feet below the surface, and this stuff is floating on the surface, but we still saw it in the plan. Now, you need lots of, we could talk about.
So Dottie, you saw the dissolved fractions, right? You saw the dissolved fractions. You didn't see free product.
No, that was free bottom.
Yeah,
You pulled free product down 40 feet through the water column?
it was sitting right in there.
Yeah, it is possible that the 20-foot intake was also online. I can't remember at this point, but either way, it's middle of the column or water column or below. So we saw free product, it was floating, it was mixed up in our solid contact. So
It sounds to me like even that's a temporary solution. The only real solution is probably something they don't want to spend money on is dredging.
Well,
They're not saying that they won't do that. They're doing pre-design investigations to get to that point. I see where you're going. They're just not there yet. They're going through the process to get there.
And also too, that could make matters worse.
yeah.
By dredging, it could release more into the water and more for us to deal with.
Okay, I don't know what's there.
It's a solid mass, 7-acre field of coal tar that's hardened on the surface,
Okay.
right? Probably hardened throughout. They've dug boreholes, they've mapped the field, they know what the field is there. They tried to do an experimental remediation with these tarps that went down, foam around it, and it was a disaster.
Yeah, well, at least I'm understanding it better as a new student.
No, these are questions just to remind everybody, because this is important. Because we had drought, we had low water volume, and we had salt, and all of a sudden we were getting above it.
Okay.
And they're saying, well, we didn't, they're first denied where it was coming from, and we all knew where it was coming from. It's a matter of Central Hudson has spent a fair amount of money putting detection into the plant. So their answer is, hey, we're going to detect it, but they're only detecting it when it gets in the plant. They're not stopping it from getting into the plant. So Dottie still has to shut down when it gets in the plant.
And what's your backup? You did have to shut down. I'm like,
There is no,
Yeah.
we have no backup.
oh my God, that's horrible.
Yeah.
One of the things I'll add really quickly is, there's going to be a complaint that the booming experiment is going to be expensive. And I think our answer, and I'm fully aware that this is a recorded and broadcast meeting, so I'm conscious of that. But it wouldn't be a bad thing if, in dealing with the coal tar blebs that come up, if that costs money, it will be a little bit of a spur in the side of Central Hudson to do phase two, which is the full job. This has gone on for half a century. This property has been discharging into so it's now time. Time is up. It's time to get the best plan available and implement that plan. And so I don't see a problem with something that might cost a little money, because that might be a little more of a spur to get on with it.
And what we're trying to do, the DEC is the police. We're trying to get DEC to do the job. That's what we want, sorry.
No. I'm
No,
not
not you personally.
No, I know.
But we want DEC to be the river cop and do the enforcement.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yes.
Our drinking water is one of my high priority issues, clean drinking water.
All right, so we're over scheduled.
Thanks, John.
Frank's, yeah, and
Thanks
all,
for educating me a little.
but this is all good stuff.
Yeah.
Rebecca, is there anything we really need to cover that we can't push off to the next?
Well, we lost Paul Melrose.
Yeah, we lost
Paul. So we're gonna do Salt Front next month. Well, there's a lot on here still. There's the Water Treatment Plant Committee updates, which is just simply to say that the third annual Hudson 7 Drinking Water Professionals Appreciation Week is upcoming on May the 25th through the 29th, which is our 8-year anniversary, which is pretty great. So that's mainly it, except to ask about a motion to include operators from the Village of Rhinebeck, Town of Lloyd, and Town of Hyde Park if they're willing to join the Water Treatment Plant Committee membership, so that the Water Treatment Plant Committee, which was formed in 2024 with members that include you, Gary, Randy, Nick, which is great, Paul and Dottie, but it's clear that the water treatment plant operators would like to invite the others to attend, to be a part of the committee. So I'd like to be able to outreach to invite them with a motion to include operators, all operators.
Well, I made a motion, I've got a second. Any discussion about including these guys? People. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Let's do it, Rebecca.
Okay. The strategic planning committee met with Larissa Reed to start conversations about strategic planning, and then in your agenda is a link to all the materials from that. We recorded the session and we got the slide deck for anybody who's interested. The only really outstanding things are John wanted to speak about the IBM discharge.
It'll wait.
Yeah.
And okay, great. So I think that's it. I think we did our business.
It's a great meeting.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Thank you all for attending. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn at 6:11.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Bye.
Have a great day.
See you
Good night,
next month.
everyone.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Somebody from,
Yeah, I got a focus to get to, so this is important.
New Falls. You guys from the BBC, I think that's.
Let me know.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. Good night.